Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm sorry that there was a little short delay there while we were trying to sort out some technical things about which I know very little, but I hope now that you are able to hear me, and that if you can, you should be able to both hear and see me, and also see Philip Moore, who is sitting suitably distanced just behind me as well, and we will be with you for the next 45 minutes or so. I want to take this opportunity to thank you first of all for making the time to hear from us this evening, and to say that what we're really wanting to do is just give you an idea about the life in the senior school. I think we make quite a few assumptions as a school that people know everything when they've got children in the junior school about what goes on in the senior school. And I do realise that some of you have got older sons and daughters that are in the senior school. But I think things have been changing quite a bit, not just in the last 6 months, but over several years. And so it's a chance for us to share a little bit about the kind of broader vision of the school, as well as the more practical things about how the senior school works. And you may think this is quite early in the year to be doing this. It is now October, but obviously it's still quite a way away. But I hope it will give you an idea of the senior school in advance of our open morning, which you're very welcome to join on Saturday morning, and details of that will follow. But also, if you do want to come and visit the school and spend time talking to either myself or perhaps particularly Mr. Moore, who is the head of the senior school, then that's a chance for you to understand better the way things work here and so on as well. There is, if you haven't been on one of these broadcasts before, there is a live chat goes down the side. I'm about to put up a PowerPoint for the moment, which will run alongside me speaking. And as a consequence of my doing that, I'm now not going to be able to see that live chat at this point. So feel free to type some questions or thoughts in as we go through this presentation. But I will then look at that live chat afterwards and try and answer any questions that have come up at that point. But the idea really is to talk for 20 minutes or so, give you a feel of and an overview of the senior school, and then have the chance to answer questions. I apologise that normally on this occasion we actually have some tea and cakes and quite a nice afternoon tea as well. So I have nothing but a glass of water here tonight, but I hope you've got something to keep you well fed and watered whilst we run through this presentation. I'm going to press a button and hope this works. This is my test. I'm getting messages from somebody which makes me think it might not be working. Oh no, the message says all good, so that's a good sign. Great. So yeah, when I first did these presentations, it was about 5 years ago now, when Ra said it's important that we do talk to the pupils, parents of pupils in the junior school about how the senior school works. We focused quite strongly on what the Year 7 curriculum looked like, what the structures were like, and so on. And we are very happy to talk about that. But I realised quite quickly from the questions that we had that really people were interested in a broader sense of what is the school all about, not just what is going to happen next year for my child in Year 7, but what do you see them going towards when it comes to sixth form or GCSEs, and what's the university outcomes and so on as well. So I am going to start quite broad before we become narrow. And it is obviously quite a serious time of change for us here at the school, just in dealing with the specific challenges of the last few months. But also we have been, as a school, making quite a few changes. I'm not an enemy of change. I quite like change. Quite a few changes over the last few years to our curriculum, to our offering, and to our focus. And this is the year 2021 when Ride School turns 100. And it's a good moment to both look backwards and talk about the traditions and values that have made the school what it is today, but also to look at what we need to be doing to make sure that we are actually ready for the challenges of the next 100 years as well. And I looked at this slide now, Changing Expectations, that I put together last year, and what struck me about it is how much the experiences of the last 6 months have only served to make us even more convinced of the importance of the points made here. Because we're focusing a little bit on thinking about what the world will be like in terms of both social and employment opportunities, and academic for that matter, for our pupils when they leave Ride School at 16 or 18. But what I found when we were doing that was we were also realising that the kind of values and requirements that we feel pupils need for managing that new world, which is very much a changing world, are also the ones that I think have tested a lot of us over the last few months. And that last bullet point down there on the slide, where I talk about the importance of resilience, creativity and flexibility, these are three phrases that I was using 2 or 3 years ago, but I think they have been particularly important in how we've dealt with and how people have dealt with the last 6 months and the challenges that COVID-19 has brought. Resilience, because it's been a real challenge to all of us at times, but also creativity, which has definitely been rewarded and come to the fore, and the need to be flexible to make things work as much as they can. Those three areas were things that we've been thinking about for the last few years, and how we can make sure that, of course, our pupils leave here at Ryde with as good a set of exam results as they can get, but that they also have built up those three crucial qualities. And that's really driven by a number of external pressures on the school and on society, some of which are mentioned here, which I'm not going to go and read the things that you can see on the slides all the way through. But I will pull out the fact that we do need to recognise that the world of work, and many of you will be employers as well as people who work today, will be much more diverse for the children, will be much more requiring of flexibility, not just in changing careers perhaps once or twice, but potentially juggling several careers simultaneously, and making perhaps some sort of social capital out of your life alongside earning money and working about what your values are that allow you to get to a good work-life balance. And the point that is being made by a man called Seligman, someone whom we've become very interested in at the school, that we should be moving towards a proper well-being programme as well. Seligman is the psychologist who's done a lot of work on well-being and positive psychology, positive education as he called it. He talked about the importance of not just filling potholes, not just having a pastoral system that responds to individual moments of challenge, but also urban planning, i.e. a pastoral care system that thinks about how we can actually prepare people and build people for the proper resilience that they need in the workplace and life that's going to come to them. And so the challenges of employment and the challenges socially and pastorally have been very much in our forefront of our minds over the last few years at the school. I think it's really important now to understand, therefore, that although we are going to get through COVID, and I think we will be a lot wiser for it, there are challenges beyond it that are still needing very similar responses to those that we've had in the past. And it just struck me on this particular issue of COVID, I've just put a couple of slides up here, sort of shameless propaganda here for an island company in Rob Thompson's UB Chef. The contrast, for example, between restaurants that have closed because COVID is over and restaurateurs that have thought about how they can redevelop their economic model. And if you're like me, you've benefited from Rob Thompson's restaurant going mobile and delivering food, as this shows you here, this logo here. And indeed, I'd like to feel, if you've had children in the school, that also our approach very much from the start of lockdown was not that school was closed, but that school carried on initially remotely, and then as soon as possible we got pupils back in and managed to have a pretty full school by the end of July. And I'd like to feel that was down to work that we did as staff, but it was also, I think, because the community, parents and pupils, were very much in that flexible, resilient, creative mindset as well. So when we're looking at our curriculum, one of the challenges that we've got as a school, and all schools have got, is that the GCSEs and A-levels prepare a certain kind of mind and assess and test a certain kind of mind, and that's great if that's how you work and operate. And in fact, that was great for me because I did find exams at school fitted the way that I learned. But I know from teaching that many pupils operate in very, very different ways. And anyway, what we were finding was they weren't really preparing us, as we felt it, for the broader needs that society wants in the people coming through the system. And this particular slide here talks about the 7 C's. I think it was UNESCO that came up with them. We're now almost a quarter of the way into the 21st century. But this was identified at the end of the last century as what are the things that we really want people to be able to do to be good citizens and effective people in the workplace for the 21st century. And what's interesting when you look at them, things like communication, cross-cultural understanding, creativity is there again. When you look at them, the fundamental problem is most employers, most people, most citizens would say these are really important things, but very little of that is being developed or assessed intrinsically by the exam system. And that was the challenge that we set ourselves a few years ago. We were also faced about 3 years ago with new exams. The A-levels became, and the GCSEs, more rigorous, more demanding. They took away the coursework. They became linear again. They're very similar to the A-levels that I did, for example. But we found that the challenges of the exams, again, changed quite quickly. So at the same time as we were thinking about how do we deal with the new challenges for the workplace, we were also finding we had new exam systems, which, if anything, went even further away from those 21st century skills by assessing memory again, by assessing recall, and so on. And into that point, we looked at other curriculum routes for us. And so at 16 plus, we do now have 3 different routes. And I think we're the only, or one of very few schools in the UK that offer 3 quite distinct routes through the sixth form. I'm not going to go into details about them now. We're talking to you about year 7. But I think it's important for you to understand where we're heading towards. And we run these 3 different routes through the sixth form. The IBDP, a pretty rigorous traditional academic education, but with a very strong international focus and very focused on university preparedness. The A-Level Plus, which is the typical A-Level course, but the plus is the enrichment that we've put into it. And the IBCP, and we were the first independent school to offer this, which is a programme that combines academic and vocational routes through the sixth form, with a particular focus on an art route, a sports route, and a business route as well through the sixth form for our students. So what we were trying to do is make sure that if we are a school that's got a very broad intake, which we are, we're a school that also offers a very broad set of options through curriculum routes as well. So that basic core A-level and GCSE programme, which is fine of itself, but is not achieving those 21st century skills, we looked to enrich and broaden within the curriculum rather than relying on it all happening outside the classroom. So at GCSE, in addition to the standard GCSEs in languages, sciences, history, maths, English and so on, we've also added an enrichment programme of electives, which you can see listed here, which develop either through a second language or through global perspectives, pushing humanities a bit further, or by the CREST Award, which is a scientific investigation unit. We've been looking at how we can broaden pupils' work, learning and understanding there. And we've done the same thing with the A-Level Plus, and you can see again the things that we've got down there, from ab initio languages, people perhaps who've had enough of French or want to broaden their language experience, to new languages, but also other areas like computing, like the Arts Award, or by being able to take an IB subject at a standard level alongside your A-levels, so that you could get that breadth which the A-level reforms actually got rid of when they changed about 3 or 4 years ago. We also make sure that we specifically provide support for pupils who are looking to study medicine, engineering, or go to Oxford or Cambridge universities, because they need that extra preparation for those applications. So what you've got there is a programme from year 10 to the sixth form, which we've done as much as we can to try and broaden it, but nonetheless, you are determined, you are constrained at that age by the external exams. And we all sort of know that the way that you learn is by making mistakes. But the problem we've got in that is that you only learn by making mistakes if you let people make mistakes, and you're not going to thank me if I let your sons and daughters make mistakes in the middle of their GCSEs or A-levels. And that's where the Year 7 and 8 curriculum comes into place. because we need to use a time when the stakes are low but the capacity for learning is high to get these children to get things wrong, to learn that it's okay to get things wrong, and then to be supported initially externally but also internally to build things up so that they get that confidence through learning by mistakes that will eventually help them when they do encounter the GCSEs and the A-levels later on. And so we are looking to get children to learn from failure in 7 and 8, so we're looking to stretch them. And we're also looking to make sure that they develop the skills and knowledge both in and outside the classroom that will achieve those ambitions that I mentioned earlier on. And that's what guides us in our Year 7 and 8 curriculum. At its core, and this I know is we're now starting to talk about how we can do a bit more of this in the junior school as well, particularly in years 5 and 6. At the core is what's called the PSB, the Prep School Back, and we have our particular version of it at RIDE. But the PSB is a programme that's adopted by a number of prep schools across largely the south of England, where they are looking together at how they can prepare children for senior school. And what are the skills they want to develop them in? Well, they are up there: communication, getting children to review and improve their work, and getting children to think and learn. Pretty obvious things you would think. But also to do it in 3 different ways: independently, so how they can work on their own; in collaboration, how they can operate together; and through leadership. And so there's that grid of 9 that you can see there, which we translate at RIDE into our own particular programme. It's sort of links in there. It's the same ideas of reviewing as a leader, learning and thinking as a communicator, and so on. But we've got our own particular version of it, which is RIDE PSBs. But that fundamental idea is to say, when we teach someone, when we're learning history or when we're learning maths, it's still important that we learn that fact. This is, it's still critical that there is content learning and knowledge learning as well. But I can actually look at whether children are also learning at the same time some of these skills. So I might be teaching about the Spanish Armada, say, in history, and I can see whether the pupils in my class remember the date of the Spanish Armada, the causes of it, the reasons for it, and so on, all important stuff. But I could also put into that a test which will assess how well they've collaborated, perhaps, or how well they've reviewed their learning as well. And by having the PSB programme, that doesn't just happen by chance. It's something which we integrate into the way which we teach and crucially assess the learning. So it might be that a child in my class does not remember that the Spanish Armada happened in 1588, but they may learn at the same time a better skill of communication or collaboration, which I can also record and recognise, and we can look at how we develop those skills alongside their academic memory as well. And we complement that further still by the skills passport that you see up there. Each of our pupils at the beginning of Year 7 gets one of these passports. It includes the review that you can see here on the right-hand side of these particular 9 skill areas that I've talked about, but it also asks them to think about experiences and skills that they've developed in and out of the classroom over the previous 2 years. So all children, when they come into Year 7, will get that passport, and it will give an identity to them in Year 7 and 8. Alongside the way in which we integrate that into the lessons, we also have a particular programme which we call RIDE Global, which takes a format of 1 lesson a week explicitly it takes place, but also other times during the week working with their tutors and so on, where they look at some of those skills which do not lend themselves necessarily to be directly assessed within the classroom setting. So you can see some of the skills that we're trying to do there on the left-hand side. This probably gives you a better idea. So we run things like public speaking, debating, various business clubs and so on. But what we realised is we needed to make sure that all our students actually didn't just have the opportunity to do those things, but actually did them. So we want everybody in Year 7 and 8 to build confidence as public speakers, to build confidence as debaters, to know a bit about neuroscience and to have skills in first aid, rather than just those that choose to actually follow that course. So the RIDE Global programme seeks to achieve all the things that you can see on that example programme. And in Year 7, we're working on them largely on individual projects, but you can see in Year 8, we're getting to develop those collaboration ones. So, for example, for the last couple of years, they've come together in a Dragon's Den style presentation of a regeneration of ride theatre, which takes quite a bit of research, quite a bit of allocation of roles and delegations of responsibilities, and also tests presentation skills at the end. And running alongside that in our summer programme is largely our outdoor learning and water sports programmes as well, which again try and test the resilience and the teamwork that we think are really important. So these are things that you would expect to find at Ride School as extracurricular activities, but they're ones we want to integrate within the curriculum into Year 7 and 8 as well. And just to give you an idea, here are some of the comments that came from some of the Year 7 pupils at the end of the course when we introduced it. And I'll let you read some of those there. You see quite quickly the reference to getting more confidence in public speaking, learning as groups, developing new skills, thinking about understanding and so on. And also I like the fact that in the blue comment, the debating was fun, speaking was difficult but great. And it's that kind of comment that really encourages us to feel we're doing the right thing. If we're challenging people to do something difficult but they still enjoy it, that's a really good outcome. The other thing that we've got involved in the last year or so is Round Square. It's an international organisation of about 200 schools around the world, committed to those principles of the ideals, internationalism, democracy, environmentalism, adventure, leadership and service that are up there. We are working particularly in Year 9 to integrate some of these values and skills into the school curriculum. They're all ones that I think it's fair to say are in demand at the moment as we deal with our COVID crisis. There are challenges to democracy, to the environment, to the ability to do adventure, the need for leadership and service, all very clear, and also the challenges of maintaining internationalism at a time when it's harder to travel and communicate. And these things are really, again, important to us. I think from our context as an island school, it's wonderful to be on the Isle of Wight. It's a safe, nurturing, warm place to be. But it's really important that we don't let our children feel that that becomes a way of avoiding the challenges and opportunities that lie out there beyond the island as well. And Round Square gives us a chance to do that. So there are various ways in which this can happen. It can happen through international conferences, which we've already had some pupils go on. Some went to India last year, for example. We also have it through the opportunity of doing exchanges. And there will be the opportunity in Year 7 and 8 for your son and daughter, if they wish, once we get through COVID, to be able to spend a term or half a term in another school somewhere else in the world. And we had 2 pupils, one to go to Colombia and one to go to Germany, lined up before COVID struck. That's a fabulous opportunity at very little cost to you as a family to get your child to have an amazing immersion experience in another culture, which they can do because they effectively go to Ride. They can therefore go to Chile, to Australia, to India, to Germany. And that's an opportunity through Round Square. But we also will be hosting in September next year the International Round Square Conference at the school, which will mean that about 300 pupils and their staff will be coming to Ride School as one of a few schools in the UK as the hosts of the International Conference for 2021. And that will again give a chance for the whole community to get involved in that experience. That gives you an idea of the kind of project. It's probably not quite time to read it through now, but the kind of stuff that we do internally. So as well as operating and giving us the opportunity to extend the pupils' experiences on an international level, we also look at those 6 ideals. I've used the example of democracy, but we do the same for environmentalism, for leadership and so on. Projects that really make the children think about and build on their PSB skills and think about those key ideals. And again, working as groups. So that's the kind of core curriculum thing that's going on in 7, 8 and 9. We also, obviously, and if you've got children in the junior school, as obviously you have, you will know that pastoral support and co-curricular are very important things to us. I very much subscribe to the view that what happens outside the classroom is at least as important to a child's development as what happens inside the classroom. And so you won't be surprised to know that we remain very committed strongly to the extracurricular work for the children, both in terms of specific activities for Year 7 and 8. So we have Year 7 and 8 drama productions, sports teams, music groups and so on. But we also have the advantage of making sure that children can engage with the older year groups as well. So things like Model United Nations, which you can see there in the middle, is something which involves pupils right the way through the school. Obviously, there are productions like Les Miserables last year, where we had people from year 7 right the way into the upper 6. The same applies to our concerts, to our house events, to some of the sports activities like sailing and cricket that aren't age specific. So it gives a chance. This is one of the things that's really been challenged by COVID, but it gives a chance for our younger pupils to really grow by learning with the older pupils as well. And I think I've already mentioned this really, but the engagement with the wider world. I've mentioned the Round Square conferences and exchanges, but we obviously do have opportunities for various trips abroad. We've got our link with Ghana, where pupils go every 2 years in October. And I think one thing that's really important for us, we've got a boarding community which comes from all around the world. And I always say to the boarders when they arrive and their parents, it's great to have you in the school, not just because I think you're going to have a good time on the island, but it's really good for us on the island to have pupils from all over the world coming into our community and helping to inform us as well. That's the kind of broad sweep stuff. I come to the school routine. I slightly turn around and look at Mr. Moore. I'm not going to go through unless you want to go through the routine, particularly Mr. Moore. But you might want to say, do you want to say a few words about this?
I can say a few words, or do you want to stop and just a quick look at the things on the chat?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, okay. Because this really is the school routine, how the day runs. I've put the stuff in red because they are things that are not happening at the moment, but actually we would hope would be in place again by this time next year, assuming we're through COVID. But we do at the moment have some mobile phones, and our periods are not all 55 minutes long. But that gives you a sense of the school routine. What I've got to do, I'm not sure I think I've got to go to the end of the slides to see this.
Oh, right, okay, but that's fine. Why don't we swap over there? No,
go on.
Crop in there.
Hi there. So those of you who haven't met before, indeed, as Mr. Waterman has said, I'm Philip Moore, and my job is running that senior school on a day-to-day basis. And if really what the headmaster's done this evening is go through and talk about sort of what we do, and probably more importantly, why we do it, I think a big part of my job is actually how we do it on a day-to-day basis. And I think some of the challenges for the children coming through from year 6 into year 7 is that they have a real sense that they actually know what the senior school is about. They come through the senior school every day to go to lunch. They come through the senior school to go to games. So it is a feeling of, yep, we know where we're going, we know what it's all about. But the reality is that it's actually different. And it's quite right that it's different. I think they'd be quite disappointed a couple of weeks in if actually year 7 felt the same as year 6 and year 6 has felt the same as year 5 and backwards. So it's right, but it does then obviously have its sort of moment of starting and understanding that, and that is part of the process. So they, if they have that sort of moment of thinking, oh, this is actually quite different, this is not quite what I expected, they'll need to bear with that and get used to that because it's an important part of the process for them. One of that sort of fundamentals there is that as much as they have a tutor when they come into year 7, that's not the person that they spend all their time with during the day. And in fact, actually, they only see them for a short period of time. They'll usually see them in the morning, and at the moment, actually, they're not necessarily seeing them from first thing. And they'll see them for their tutor sessions that, as we saw there, are part of sort of the RIDE Global and mentoring, sort of tutor mentoring sessions that we run each week. But that doesn't get away from the fact that the tutor is really the fundamental person that collates all the information on each child and is your sort of daily contact. They're the person that really knows that child very well. So when you sort of come through to the senior school, that's going to be their real go-to person. They sometimes are surprised that it is considerably bigger than they expected, and they wander around to start with going, I'm a little bit lost, I'm having to use my map to find everywhere. But here we are 3 weeks in, and I've not seen anybody going around with a map at all. So what we have to do this then is it's really important there to think that we do have those lessons as it goes before. The pupils do go from one place to another. It's really important that they're getting involved in the different activities that they have on a day-to-day basis. But that idea of how does it work on a nuts and bolts, will I have prep on Monday, will I have prep on Tuesday? The answer to both of those is yes, but we'll go through a lot of that detail when the time comes and it's much sort of closer to actually seeing what's happening. But you can see there's an example of a day. They'll have those various lessons. Certainly in Year 7, they have a broad curriculum of everything. The maths and English is an important part of what they do, as well as the science, but we give them experience across all the different subjects at the same time. It's probably best, I think, there that if I sort of come to an end, and then we can just, I'll let Mr. Wharton go back and talk a little bit about the mission statement, and then we'll get on to questions with you.
Thanks, Philip. I'm not going to talk about the mission statement. I just popped it up there for you to see where we are. And say, Mr. Moore can definitely answer any detailed questions that you might have, but I recognise that this is October, and that may seem quite a long way away, but I know that there are sometimes quite specific questions that people like to answer. But I'm happy to talk. I'll take any questions now about anything really that comes up there, and I'm going to have to go, in order to see what questions you've asked, I've got to take this down. So I'm just going to turn this slideshow off, and I think then hopefully I can see that there. That's great. You can't talk to us, I don't think. I think what needs to happen is you need to type something in down in the sidebar down there. It is much easier when we're all in a room together and I can sort of sense you and see where you're going. And I'm very conscious that I've just sort of fired a load of points off at you. But if there's any questions about anything from how the transition works to what the kind of principles are, again, that we talked about earlier, that guide us, please type away down the side, and I'll do my best to answer. We have got a time lag as well, haven't we?
We have, yep.
Yeah.
Which is why slight delay before any questions come in. It's looking like we've answered all the questions.
Well talked.
Well.
Great. Yeah, okay. So on the question of mobile phones, our policy is that there should be no mobile phones for pupils in years 7 and 8. And we were planning to extend that up to year 9. So we actually introduced it gradually. So 2 years ago it was year 7, and then it was year 7 and 8, and then 7 and 8 and 9. And we do think that actually that has been a very good thing for both their mental health, but also for creating a proper socialisation. What happened what's happened in the last, because of COVID and the lockdown, is we felt that we've had to let pupils have mobile phones with them for various reasons. Our policy at the moment is that they shouldn't get them out and use them unless they're allowed to in year 7 and 8 and 9. But obviously it hasn't been as easy to police as it would have been in the past. And our intention would be to go back to no mobile phones as soon as we're out of the COVID time. But we do need it at the moment because of alerts, because of using technologies for setting homeworks and that sort of thing, which we weren't doing before. So it's a matter of regret for me. I mean, I've spent a lot of time over the last few years trying to get pupils off devices, trying to encourage parents to have what I call a digital sunset, trying to say don't spend too much time online, all that sort of stuff. And here we are talking online now. So it is a challenge, but we definitely don't want to have mobile phones in year 7 and 8. And we think that was a benefit, and we saw a benefit as it came through. And that was very much something backed by parents as well. How many classes will be in year 7? So generally we would expect there to be 4 form groups in year 7, and that follows through into year 8 as well. The children will be in a form group which will be linked to their house group, and they will stay with that form group and indeed that form tutor for year 7 and year 8. And then in year 9, they stay as a form group, in fact, but they get a new tutor who will take them through year 9, 10 and 11. So the form groups are 4 of them normally, and we would expect a year group size of about 70. That's our standard size in year 7. So this year it's 67, I think, which is a bit lower than some years. Other years it's gone up to about 75. We think those groups of 4 work quite well. Once we, if it gets to more like 80 plus, then we might create, as we did 2 years ago, 8 groups, 8 form groups, because we had the 2 house groups, 2 groups for each house. So that's that. We look a little bit about the numbers. It's very hard to know at this stage what the numbers will be like, although what I have seen is that there's a bigger registration for year 7 for next year than any time for the last 5 or 6 years, certainly that I can remember. So it may be that the numbers are such that we would have 8 groups, but we'd have 8 or 4 basically. When it comes to the form group is only your tutor group. So that would translate to sets probably of 4 sets, and we set according to different subjects. So you could be in set 1 for English, set 3 for maths, set 2 for science, and we sometimes have 5 sets for English and maths, although we'll have 4 sets for other subjects. So that will depend a little bit on the numbers again. We've been running a streaming system as in the junior school because of COVID this term, but again, that's not a long-term thing. I'm not a fan of streaming other than when it's necessary, as it is now, to keep bubbles together. So pupils will not be in the same groups for different subjects. They'll move around.
But we do say that the maximum class size is 22. So at no point do we have the classes that go beyond that number.
Yeah. So which subjects are in sets and how many sets are there? So I think we've talked about the sets. Generally there'll be 4 or 5 sets. Maths has its own grouping.
Yes, it does.
English is grouped with history and religious studies.
That's correct.
Science is grouped with geography. Languages, the French department, they have a mixed ability term with French, and then they set on ability at that point just on French. You have a language choice. I didn't mention that. It's the only real choice that's made in year 7 where people choose different curriculums, where they choose between German, Mandarin, and Latin. And obviously, then it's mixed ability in the sense that it's depending on the subject that you teach, what you do. Normally there's 2 sets of German is the one that tends to be more popular, but it will depend on the choices that are made. Is there a tutor per class? So in terms of tutor, each form group has its own tutor. So there will be 4 tutors. There are currently 4 tutors in year 7. And then in addition to that, there's a head of year 7. And that head of year 7 and those 4 tutors will then, in year 8, become the head of year 8 and the form tutors for those year 8s. So that they will move through. And then last year's year 8s will roll back to look after year 7. So it's a 2-year programme of support that you get in year 7 and year 8. And then there's also Dr. Speller, who is the head of year 7 and 8. So he sees the overall programme, both the academic and the pastoral programme in year 7 and 8 as well. The school's policy on mental health. So I started talking a bit about that, and I was sort of probably rushing a bit through. But the man Marty Seligman, I think, has probably been quite a strong influence on a number of us. And Christina Vince, who is our head of pastoral care, is in overall charge of the pastoral well-being, and particularly the mental health of the children. But I would say that our kind of key thrust is to try and be preventative and proactive rather than reactive. When I came to the school 7 years ago now, I felt we had a very good pastoral system for dealing with problems, but I wasn't convinced that we were that good at actually stopping the problems happening in the first place. So, of course, we still have a system there to look after children who struggle, and the mobile phones policy is a good example of this, where a lot of problems and a lot of challenges for the children have definitely come through things that start outside school or start on social media or start through technology and then come back into school as well. So we're very conscious of the need to watch their well-being in and out of school. But the point about the Seligman idea of positive education is that what we need to find from the start is to make sure that the children have got and developed skills for managing what we recognise will be difficult times. So rather than pretending things will be easy, we look at and recognise those challenges coming up, and then we seek to try and preempt them as much as possible and prepare them for it. That does not mean that we get everything right or that every child copes with that. Of course they don't. And we have got that system where you've got the tutor as the first port of call who sees them daily and is the person that you as a parent are in contact with. In addition, the head of year and then that head of section. And then above that, Miss Vince, there's quite a lot of layers of support, but we're trying to start to deal with things at the lowest possible level where we can. We also put in specific programs within our PD program to try and talk about well-being. Part of the RIDE Global program includes analysis of the brain and how the brain works and operates. Again, I think that often just helping children to understand the kind of chemical changes that they're going to go through and what that means for moods and relationships and so on. So that's an important part of how we look after the mental health of children as well. And then, of course, we work quite closely with various agencies, and particularly on the island. There are some, the Island Youth Trust, for example, who comes in and does counselling and support services for the children. And we would say that we feel that the physical well-being is an important part of the mental well-being as well. Our pastoral centre is now one that deals with mental and physical support simultaneously, because sort of, healthy mind, healthy body, I think, is a genuine way of supporting children through difficult times. Philip, do you want to add anything?
Just for the fact that sort of coaching culture we've introduced sort of 5 or 6 years ago is a really important part of what happens. So that for somebody to coach, it's not telling them what they need to do. It's allowing them to find those answers of what changes they need to make from within themselves. And all the staff that come new to the school and our existing staff have been trained in that way, and you'll see sort of various parts around by the Pastoral Centre for the students that really emphasise that as well.
I've been asked a question about houses. So the house that you join, the same 4 houses that you have in the junior school, you would stay in that house group right the way through the senior school. And that means that your tutor group, which is linked to your house group, would stay the same from year 7 through to year 11. In the sixth form, the tutor groups are based upon subject interests, and so you will tend to find that a scientist will be looking after a group of students that are particularly interested in science, and because they'll be working on supporting them for university admissions and their wider reading and so on. But you stay in the same house actually all the way through the time. We do look. I mean, if there may be some individual cases going in from year 6 to year 7 where there is a feeling either from the school or from parent that it makes sense to change break some relationships up, and where that happens, either if the school thinks that, Mr. Marsden would speak to Mr. Moore about it, and obviously would involve you in a discussion, but equally if you feel that you've got some concerns and you'd like to break something up in terms of groups, then that would be possible as well. But fundamentally we try and keep people together in the same houses so they get that continuity going through the school. And I think it's worth saying, I mean, there are I think 41 of you at the moment, 41 children in year 6. We would expect there to be between 70 and 80 pupils in next year's year 7. So the reality is that about half the pupils will come from RIDE Junior School, but another half approximately will come from outside the school. So it does create a quite different feel of a school, and you do find, I mean, I think it's genuinely a positive thing. It sort of shakes up friendships and relationships a little bit for them. And some continuity through for the house can actually help there. I don't know if you want to say anything else about that particularly.
No, I think that covers all that house part.
There's a question about dyslexia. Do you want to talk about dyslexia actually?
As a school, we recognise that different students have different needs, and dyslexia is one of those needs. And our teachers over the time we've undergone training and recognise that they need to work in different ways to be able to support the children.
One of the aspects of Mrs. Coughlin doing her role across the school, rather than just being a head of learning support for junior school or a head of learning support for senior school, is you get that complete continuity as students go from one section of the school to the other in terms of information. And all those pupil profiles that are created for each of the individual children that recognise what strategies work for them in the classroom, and what particular things the teachers can do to help them in their learning, they automatically flow through as the child goes through from year 6 into year 7, and we update that as well. But certainly our teachers are very well versed in being able to support our dyslexic students, because we see it there that shouldn't be seen as some kind of barrier to learning in the slightest.
Yeah. I mean, actually, some of the points we were making about that broader curriculum element is really important to that, because I think that the more you say that we are going to follow a curriculum based on the rigid GCSE A-level outcomes, which definitely work for some people, I would say they work for me, but the more you focus on that, the more you're setting up other people to be seen as failing because they're not following that particular path. But you know, we all know that there's some great charities out there that deal with dyslexia work, and one I particularly like is called Made by Dyslexia, which actually talks about how, because someone has dyslexia, that gives them a certain advantages. They see the world in different ways, which I think for all this creativity and flexibility talk, some of that actually, you'll find that children who don't see things quite in as linear a way are actually seeing some quite interesting perspectives that other people are missing. And I think that our PSB program in particular in year 7 and 8 allows some of those children to come to the fore. Certainly public speaking is something which a lot of dyslexic children actually, once they master a technique for public speaking, it can become a really strong compensatory thing. And I think that's why often business people who have to do pitches and so on will often be better if they've got dyslexia, because they've learned to get away from the notes that they read and consult and just get up there and speak and be themselves. I think we've got some great stories about that. The other thing that I think we should say is that we've been quite clear that we don't want to have a curriculum that you have to do extras. There was a tendency to say, if you have dyslexia and you need some English language support, say, you miss history to go and do that extra English class, or you can't do the musical instrument because you've got to focus on doing an extra maths clinic or whatever it might be. And we've been quite clear and quite keen in the curriculum from year 9 onwards, and certainly at GCSE when you make your choices, you can choose as a choice English and or maths support. So yes, you get one less GCSE, but rather than having to take time out of the lessons to get extra support, or having to pay extra money to get extra support, you get within curriculum time the extra additional support that you need to make sure that you maximise your outcomes in those other exams. And I think that's a really important part of what we do for dyslexia provision as well. Okay, so allocation of sets at the start of year 7, again, probably one for you, Philip.
Yes, indeed. So for the beginning of year 7, we do set on the English, maths and the science there. The information that we gain as part of the assessment process of pupils coming into the school, whether that be coming from year 6 or whether it be coming from external to the school, everybody actually does all the same assessments. So that the assessments that the children do in the junior school are the same as the assessments that are done for the external pupils. And from that information, we then form the initial groups in English and maths. And I emphasise the word initial. It's not then sort of set in stone forever that anybody will be in that group. Within both subjects, there are then the half-term assessments that happen each term. And we do say that we will look at the setting in both January and for the beginning of a new year, so that we have this sort of first term of students coming in where the setting has happened, and then we will reflect on that as we come towards the end of that first term, just to see what's actually happening on the ground, and not just in terms of numbers, but actually what the teachers are providing in terms of feedback. Because we know that students will have come from different situations and had different educational experiences up till that point.
Yeah. It's probably worth saying as well that the set sizes, we do make them in such a way that departments make their own calls. So, for example, maths will tend to say that they can take the top couple of sets full at 22. In fact, they'd like to take more, but we won't let them. They have 22, they can move quite quickly, they can all move at the same pace and so on. And by putting 22 and 22, that actually means that the sets, the lower sets in maths will only have sort of maybe 8 or 9 pupils in them, so they can get quite a lot of individual support. So I think it's really important for parents to realise that it is better that your child is in the right level rather than wanting to always be in the set 1 or set 2, because actually they'll get the support that they need in the lower sets, probably more. There'll be more individual tailored support for them. English and history, for example, might prefer to say, I'd rather have 18 pupils right the way across. They may have a slightly smaller group at the bottom end, because actually what they want to do is get more discursive stuff going on, and it's better to have a slightly smaller group than 22, but a larger group than 7 or 8. So different departments will make different decisions about how they want to actually run those individual sets. When we are creating them with the intention, and our intention is that anyone who comes into the senior school is somebody who we believe can get the necessary GCSE grades, when we look at their profiles, to be able to access A-level and IB courses. So there's no sense that because you're in set 5 of 5 for maths, that means that we're not expecting you to get a GCSE pass grade in maths. We are expecting that. So our objective and aim is that everybody will get at least a 4, which is the old C at GCSE. They will get a 4 at the very least in their maths and their English, and indeed I think that is exactly what did happen this year. I think everybody got a 4 or above in English, and all but about 2 in maths, I think. Yeah. So it doesn't matter which set you're in, the ambition remains that you're going to be getting good grades to allow you to go on to higher study at 16. I'm conscious there that there are no more questions coming at the moment. I won't quite sort of assume that means there are no more questions, because I am aware we're on a slight time lag. So do feel free to ask any more questions that you've got. I'm sorry to not be able to be here with a kind of flourish at the end and to bring up my slideshow again and sort of talk about the importance of the IB learner profile and all those PSBs and so on that I would normally do. But if I do that, you'll disappear and I won't know if you've got any more questions. So I just want to kind of reiterate at the end, really, the point of the importance of these broader skills that we're doing in 7 and 8, but really that point that we want 7 and 8 to be fun. We want them to not see it as being getting to the next stage, getting to the next stage, getting to the next stage, but really genuinely getting them to enjoy learning and to feel that it's okay to get things wrong and to work together. That naturally leads to the question about homework, which has now come up, because if they really enjoy the learning, they'll just naturally, of course, do their homework. But over to you again, Philip, for homework.
Indeed. So, do they have homework every day? The answer is yes. From Monday to Friday, there are 2 homeworks in Year 7, each of them being 30 minutes long. So, for a child in Year 7 and for Year 8, we wouldn't be looking for them to do any more than an hour of homework, or as we call it, prep, on any particular night.
And homework is set, as I think it now is in the junior school as well, through Google Classrooms, yeah?
That's correct.
Yeah. So you can monitor it as parents if you want to.
Just on that issue of homework, it is probably worth highlighting there that in the normal arrangements there we have the extended lunchtime, and students who are involved in things out of school or maybe have a long sort of journey home will take that opportunity during the day to be able to do one of their preps or both of their preps. And likewise, at the end of the day, there is prep session time that you can go into the library or into the prep club at that point and get work completed at that stage. That might be if you're catching the bus that little bit later, so you could get it done at that point. So to feel that the homework and the prep needs to come home every single day, particularly if they've got activities they're doing outside of school, it might well be that they say, well, actually, I'm involved in swimming after school, maybe I'm involved in horse riding after school, they can take the opportunity in the school day to get that work done, to allow them the time after school and in the evenings to do those other activities and things that they need to be doing.
Thanks, Philip. I think we have been on an hour, so thank you for your time. I'm not going to go away, so if anyone does have any questions that come up, I will definitely stay on here for a little bit longer in case there are some that want to come up. But for now, I think that's probably we've covered what we want to cover, and I would say as well that we have got this open morning, this virtual open morning on Saturday. So do come along to that, as it were. There are some live question and answer sessions with pupils and with staff at that, and there's also various videos. So you can actually access videos. You don't have to do it live. You can just catch that and get a feel for what the school's like. Obviously, as parents in Year 6, you've got a lot more awareness of what things are like than most. We haven't talked about boarding at all, but there is the opportunity for people to do flexi-boarding as well. And that is something which you might want to consider and look at. We've obviously got the new boarding coming on site. The new boarding house will be opening in February, and we've got the reconfigured boarding house at Millfield, which opened earlier in the year. And obviously, when we get through this pandemic, as we at some point presumably will, we will have the opportunity for you to come and visit the school physically as well in a more systematic basis. But the plan at the moment is for your sons and daughters to have a look around tomorrow, and weather permitting, because I think the forecast is pretty awful tomorrow, we will try and get them to have a look around the school, just so that we can recreate as much as we could do what would have been the normal open morning weekend coming up this weekend. Our next open morning after that is in February. I think you've got to be pretty optimistic to think that's going to be any less virtual than this one. But we will definitely make sure we've got the opportunity to show you around if we can later in the year. I had hoped this would be itself live in the marquee, but we got guidance from the Isle of Wight Council that this was probably pushing it too much. So you've probably gathered I try and push as far as I can, but there's only a certain limit. So hence how we're speaking to you now. Thanks, Ra. Okay, great. And Ra's put on there a way, if you want to, of how you can actually email admissions to get the link to the open morning, which you can get sent tomorrow. So do feel free to get in touch with Ra if you want to. And I suppose I should finish by saying, if you do want to come and see us for an individual meeting, by all means do. We are doing tours around the school. So if you want to come and actually have a look around the senior school, that is absolutely fine. We can certainly take a group of up to 3 of you around the school. And equally, if you want to just come and talk to myself or Mr. Moore about the provision, then do. And similarly, if you want to talk about something specific like the sports provision or the music or scholarships and so on, there are individuals that can help you with that as well. So don't feel because you are in Year 6 and already in the school that you can't ask, as anybody else would, about what's going on in the school. We're here to very much help you and answer your questions, and you may as well take the advantage of being part of the community to make it a nice, easy way of making appointments. Otherwise, thank you very much, and I hope you have a good evening. And I will just stay on a little bit longer, but I recognise now that the number of viewers will probably start to go down, and I hope you have a good evening. Thank you for your time, and sorry there were no cakes.